In this video, I want to talk about Elliott Abrams and Venezuela, but mostly about Elliott Abrams. If you're not familiar with who Elliott Abrams is, the easiest way to describe him is he's that evil lurch that stands behind all the politicians in the war party and does the dirty work. He's the one that communicates with the rebels on the ground when we're trying to do a coup with some rebels that are, maybe not that humanitarian in nature. He's the guy that goes on TV if you need him to. He's the fixer. Goes on TV if you need him to and sells a war or lies for you or says there was a covers things up or loses facts, as you'll find out. And he was involved leading up to the invasion of Iraq. He was in the H.W. Bush's administration. He's just the neoconservative, war-mongering, horrible human. And the reason I bring him up is we've been trying to cover Venezuela the best we can over on the information war. And if you don't know who Elliott Abrams is, then you're not going to understand what's going on in Venezuela from an American perspective. So, Secretary of State Pompeo, came out and declared that Elliott Abrams will be the special envoy to Venezuela. And I bring this up because he has a long history of doing horrible, and supporting horrible things in Latin America. Coups, assassinations, cover-ups, the Contras. So let's get started. And as I go through this, understand the time period I'm talking about, how recent it is, how current the situation is with migrants coming to America, and this whole idea that Latin America is a bunch of third world countries that can't get their shit together. So just follow the timeline. So Elliott Abrams, he got his first shot in the early 80s, 81, as, I forget the name that they gave him, some kind of fake-ass name, State Department Human Rights Council or something, from 81 to 85. What he did there is he helped cover up in El Salvador. We had a civil war that we started. We didn't like the party in power, so of course we had to fund a rebel group. The rebel group participated in a mass slaughter at a village that I'll link to. This is all from a recent article over at The Intercept, and an interview over on Anti-War Radio with Scott Horton. The village rape, slaughter of women and children, beheadings, the whole thing. This is in El Salvador. These are the people that Elliott Abrams is backing and providing diplomatic cover for, and in the media saying, we're fine, we got to get these guys. They're moderates. It's just what John McCain does, but without being a senator, I guess. In that civil war in El Salvador, close to 75,000 people were killed. And of course, it was a coup to overthrow a populist government there. Now, the problem is, as I say that, the right-wing people that are listening to this might think, oh, well, they're overthrowing socialism. The first and foremost principle we should have as Americans is we don't mess with you. If you want to be socialists, whatever, don't come mess with us. Don't come bring your government to us. We're not going to bring our government to you. The problem is we do not like that because instead of working with that government and finding common ground, we'd rather just be aggressive and use force. So that's the side, but I wanted to get that out of the way because this keeps going. Okay, so then he graduates, Elliott. In 85, he becomes Assistant Secretary of State for Inter-American Affairs. So, let's skip down. we'll stay in the 80s before he gets. There's, he has. This is like a good movie. Like, Tom Hanks could star at him or somebody like that. He's got a good history here. So we're still in his first phase, the 80s, Latin America, Guatemala. So he's involved in destruction of Guatemala. So if you don't know the history of Guatemala, I'm not Guatemalan, so I'm not going to pretend to understand their side of the story. But from an American side of the story and what our government has done in the better part of 70 years, in 1954, there was a coup that the U.S. Was involved in, and since then, there's been military dictators that we've systematically approved of with our stamp, and of course, there's been civil wars throughout that time with uprisings against, of course, the military dictators. So there's technically been a civil war from 1960 to 1996 in Guatemala. It's right there. Never hear about this, ever. Elliott Abrams. This is what he's doing. 200,000 people have been killed over that time. And an international body has determined that the state, so the government, so the dictatorship side of the conflict, was responsible for at least 90% of the deaths and destruction. And the guy that we're backing the whole time, Elliott Abrams, at the end of this, when he was arrested and tried, he was found guilty of genocide. So this just gives you an idea of the type of person Elliott Abrams is, and Trump is putting him in charge of Venezuela and facilitating this coup in any way possible, using military force or endowment of democracy money, fomenting student groups, whatever we need to do. He's done it all before, and he's done it in Latin America. Of course, you can't get up in the ranks in the State Department in the 80s without screwing with Nicaragua, so he was involved there. He wanted a full invasion of Nicaragua, and after the Contras were cut off from the CIA drug money, Elliott Abrams personally went to Brunei, that's Brunei, the Sultan of Brunei, and got funds to fund the Contras directly once Congress cut off his funding. So even when Congress, a bunch of politicians that mostly don't care, we have this to cut off funding, even if it's making us look bad. Not Elliott. Mr. Abrams is going to make sure that he gets the job done. For that and other things that were done when he was working for in the Reagan years, he was arrested, tried. He did like 100 hours of community service, but he was kicked out of the government, and he was pardoned by, of course, his real boss, George H.W. Bush, when he was in office. Moving on to, I forgot, Panama. So he also worked to put Noriega in power in Panama. So everybody talks about the end when we went in and got Noriega, but we also have to install the dictator. Kind of like with Iran, where we had to install the Shah, and that started the whole thing. They had a government that they all liked them, and they had a whole thing going on, and we just had to get in there. So Nicaragua, we had to do that. We had to put Noriega in. He was our boy. Somebody had to do that. Panama, Abrams. So Elliott Abrams was involved in putting Noriega in. And after Noriega murdered his rival, not his political rival, but those dissidents that the same kind of guys that Putin makes disappear, there was public torture and murder of one guy, and Elliott Abrams kind of was like, "Listen, we got to do what we got to do," and he's a good guy. He's just a soulless individual. When you look up his photo, that's what he looks like. He was also involved in Venezuela already. In 2002, when there was an attempted coup on Chavez, he was involved trying to work that out. It's kind of interesting what he did there. He was kind of the middleman which is kind of what he does, which kind of makes him even more of a sleazeball. So even when you're dealing with like the worst rebel leader or dictator or whatever, and you don't even want to send, the assistant CIA director or anybody like that, you just send sleazy Elliott. He'll go deal with anybody. And that's kind of the vibe you get from the guy. So that's what he's done in Latin America. So now we have Trump putting him in. So everybody like me who thinks Trump's doing a decent job in the Middle East with withdrawing from Syria, which we'll get to in a different video, and Afghanistan, Iraq, and pushing that that narrative there. He's got his babies, and that's Iran, and sadly it's this Venezuela, but also this remaking again of Latin America situation that it sounds like John Bolton has his ear on. Here's a history of what we've done to some of these countries in very recent time, and one of the main guys who's been involved with these, and also the Middle East. We didn't even get to the things he's done in the Middle East. He was involved in Iraq. He's been involved in Iran, in attempted overthrows there, 2003, things like that. Israel-Palestine in 2006. Famously, George Bush said, okay, let's get them elections. Let's have the people of the Gaza Strip have democracy. Let's give them elections. And they, of course, tried to fund Fatah and make sure that it worked in their favor. And instead, Hamas won. After that, we had to back off our ideas of democracy because the team that we didn't back won, regardless of what we feel about Hamas. The point is the optics as a superpower. So you send in Elliott to make sure that the new government there, Hamas, is completely diffused from the beginning. Why, pumping up the terrorist aspect, funding Fatah. He's just always there to do the dirty work. Results don't matter to him. Again, you can check out his interviews where he's just blatantly lying, or they bring up something from his past and he's just like, he lets it go. It doesn't matter. He's like an equal opportunity guy. You just hire him for that little interval. He does his job and he doesn't care about the repercussions. There's no remorse in his voice. So this is a new situation for Venezuela. I don't think the initial push has worked. So now they're going to send over Elliott Abrams. He might get himself killed, hopefully. But I just wanted to give a quick video on him. I've written about him before. I've done a video about him. I'll link to that. That was more about, I think Trump initially tried to make him like secretary, brought him up for something ridiculous, and he got shot down. And that was because of all the mistakes he made in the Middle East, and that's kind of what sunk him there. But I'll link to that if I can find it. If you haven't seen my other video I recently did about Tulsi Gabbard, my theory and my scheme to see if we can get anti-war people on the left and the right who don't want to vote for any of these party people to maybe, register Democrat for the primary and see if we can get Tulsi to get the nomination at least. And then at least the conversation will be about who can bring home the most troops, not who can bomb the most countries. So until next time, check us out on the radio, Information War Radio. Decentralized News is the show on Tuesdays and Saturdays. Saturdays, I believe, starts around 6 p.m. Tuesdays is at 8, I believe, 8 o'clock. You can check us out over on decentralizednews.com and .net or net or com. I post my stuff there, but these videos will be on YouTube also over on my my WordPress. So again, Venezuela is going to continue to evolve, and check out my other video on Tulsi. Until next time, guys, have a good night.